To tell you a little bit about myself, right now I'm currently an instructional coach for the Metropolitan School District of Washington Township in Indianapolis, Indiana. I've been a member of the IB Educator Network since 2008, and I feel like it has been my prime learning experience. I thought I was comfortable with what I knew about the PYP going into that into joining the IBAN network. And then, once I joined and started interacting with schools and interacting with other IBAN professionals, it really helped me raise my game. So it's been a really exciting journey since 2008 for that. As a result of that work, I was invited to The Hague to be part of the enhanced PYP development, and also in the design sprint for the digital space of the program standards and practices. So those were two great opportunities that were provided to me. I've worked in PYP schools since about 2003. I started out as a third grade teacher. So writing this unit for the upper primary was right in my wheelhouse. I've stayed active at any point as being a coordinator or the instructional coach role in exhibitions. So getting comfortable with fifth grade is also another wonderful experience and opportunity for me. And let's see. And then probably the one thing that you got to know is I love cats. I've got a big boy right here next to me right now, trying to actually get up on the desk. His name is Buddy, and he's about 16 years old. And he is Daddy's #1 fan. And so I'm definitely a big cat person. So shout out to all you cat people out there. I know we get a bad rap, but we're good people. All right, so let's begin today. And I liked thinking about this image of me in the fog here because of how my thinking, really started to change as I engaged in this process. I've been planning PYP units, for 20 years now. And, I've been presenting lately about a new framework that I've been believing in. And if you were part of the PYP bootcamp, you might have saw my presentation of that framework there. But engaging in this process of building this unit caused me to be very reflective and to maintain an open mind to any new ideas, because I wanted to merge that new planning framework with the PYP planning templates. And so naturally, as you can imagine, there were moments where I had some cognitive dissonance. Okay, and so that's what I'm trying to represent here with this fog, is this state of fogginess that kind of lived on throughout many parts of this process, and how my thinking ended up evolving as part of that reflection and being in mind. So you watch throughout this presentation for that fog to appear and reappear. And it just gives you a little inclination that there was definitely some evolving thinking going on in these moments. All right, so today we're going to look at 3 objectives. We're going to describe the role of beliefs and mindsets in curriculum planning. As you know, I'm bringing in my thinking and belief about this new framework. And then we're going to recognize the complementary roles of these multiple planning frameworks, and then explain how thinking evolves within the process of curriculum planning. And we'll walk you through many aspects of the actual plans of this unit. And I'll be able to talk to you about how my thinking either changed or continued and such. So let's get started with describing the roles of beliefs and mindsets in curriculum planning. So in the chat, I want you to get us started by sharing some of the beliefs and mindsets that you bring to the curriculum planning process. And I want you, to be mindful of the intentional beliefs about planning, about learning in the PYP, all those things. What do you intentionally bring into the process? So go ahead and write those into the chat right now, and Shraddha will share some of your thinking with me.
For sure. So go ahead and select all panelists and attendees. Great. So Chad, Rachel says purpose and action. Planning should begin with why is this important for us to study and what are we going to do with it? Mrinmai says, focus on inquiry and the growth mindset. Babita says being student oriented is something that, is a belief she has. Huda brings us back to the learner profile attributes of the IB as being core to the planning process as well. Neeta Rowe shares curriculum should be about what students want to learn and not only what we think they should know. Um, Christine says questions like, is this developmentally appropriate? Is it connected? Is it meaningful? Um,
Right.
they stand out to her. Jency says inquiry brings changes into me as much as it does into my students as well. So I see a lot of IB learner profile attributes. A few of the responses that I took are also showing for asking those pertinent questions of what do they want to learn as opposed to what do I want to teach them or what do I
Absolutely.
think they should know. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. All right. So, and the one thing these are intentional things. So there's no fog on this screen. These are things we know, we understand, we bring to the process each time. Okay. But I want to share with you some thinking about, how beliefs and mindsets, there are ones that we intentionally bring, but there's also ones that we unintentionally bring to this process. And we bring them to anything we are engaged in, and curriculum planning is one of those things. And so I first learned about the ladder of inference from a training at the PYP Global Conference in Orlando back in 2017, when I attended a pre-conference session where Peter Singay was sharing this model as part of his compassionate systems framework. And when he talked about this framework, we have to recognize, that our beliefs drive our actions, and what we perceive to be truths, they are truths that we have formed with a combination of truths and selected truths, and then we bring this biased view to the curriculum planning process. And by selected truths, I mean, that in any opportunity, any engagement or whatever, we know what's going on, but we selectively pay attention to only certain parts of that. So all of these truths and the beliefs and such that we built are based on these selected truths that we've gained from that process. Now we create often, from these beliefs, then we start creating rules and requirements that are based on these selected truths. They might, we might have perceptions of the curriculum planning process. We might have perceptions of other people who are involved in the process of planning with us. So I know that I have constructed some beliefs that have drove my actions in curriculum planning for years. And so, I have to recognize that I am bringing that belief, that mindset to this process. And so when I say this, I want you to understand that what I'm sharing today is heavily biased from my point of view. Okay. And so this does not recognize an exact truth, as if you were reading from the IB documents, and trying to understand this process yourself. So I recognize it, and I want to be upfront and honest about that recognition from the start. So when you think about your possible unintended biases that you might bring into the process of curriculum planning, what might those be? And Shrad's going to share a few of those unintentional beliefs and mindsets that you personally might bring into this process.
Uh, Kim Kim says time. You got to get it done, and there's always this rush.
Mm.
Nita, who had earlier pointed out about like what do the kids want to learn, like not what I want to teach. She basically says the fact that I think I know what they want to learn is
Oh,
is something that stands out to
yes,
her um, as a belief. Probably age, kids are too young, says Nandini. Ola shares
mhm,
unintentional subject comfort zone is something that stands out. Related concepts, personal experience, the thing about covering certain concepts and that need to have to do that. Quite
yes,
a few people have highlighted that as well.
yes,
Jerica says over planning, which I'm sure is something that a lot of inquiry teachers also, are always thinking about that balance. Um, yeah, a lot of this stands out. So own experiences, real life experiences, um, those are things that people might be unintentionally bringing into their planning as well.
excellent, excellent. Thank you all for sharing that.
Yeah.
And so, the biggest influencer I know to my personal beliefs and mindsets into this process is I wanted to be able to use uh, the plan, the framework that I presented at the PYP boot camp here, and fully integrate that into the planning process, within a PYP planning template. And so, with this model, I'm only going to give you a quick little overview, but then I'm going to walk you through some of how that planning looked like. But this is a model that's built off the work of Michael Halliday. He was a linguist, and so he was part of thinking about language experiences and language learning opportunities as being this integrated piece of learning language, learning about language, and learning through language. And so in my presentation for a boot camp, I mentioned that I think that if you use this model for all subjects, even beyond language, that you're designing a significant, engaging, relevant, and challenging curriculum or even a learning experience because of the integration of all three of these aspects. And that's why that target is at the center. We're not trying to isolate any one of these things when we are planning activities or when we're planning units necessarily, but we're looking at that full integration. So I know I bring this model to this process. It's part of my beliefs, my actions, my perspective, and so this is one way to plan a unit and a chance for me to show you a little glimpse of what's going on in my mind. And again, it's not necessarily the right way to plan a unit. Okay, it's just my way. All right, so when I had to start thinking about this planning process, I needed to first get a little inspiration. And so I actually dug into the next generation science standards. And I like this set of standards because they include some cross-cutting concepts. And looking at those cross-cutting concepts, by cross-cutting they mean they work across disciplines and other subject areas. They're not just science-specific concepts. And so I wanted to kind of get some inspiration from some of those that were included in the like grades 3 through 6 within their documents and kind of see where I was going. So then I became a little intrigued with this idea of continuity and change. And, in thinking from a science perspective at first, I thought about, that then how important perhaps balance and force would be with those concepts. And so literally I've got my little planning board here with a whiteboard on it right here by my desk. And I just started sketching this out. I put continuity, change, balance, and force there. And then I started thinking about some of the other concepts and some of the other ideas um, that were kind of going on in my head, and started drawing lines to show some of these concepts and the connections between them. Now, you can see how my thinking changed a bit as I started thinking outside of the realms of science. I started bringing in some of the red, um, marker here for some of those pieces. Uh, but the one thing that was very interesting for me was before I kind of got to even to that process, I recognized that even with continuity and change, I really needed a why. I needed a context to influence where I was kind of going with this unit, to kind of think about it, being more transdisciplinary or at least interdisciplinary. And so I perused our state's social studies standards to get at some ideas. And I really liked this idea of development, and I could think of like how continuity and change really influenced this idea of development. And so then I decided to add that to my map, and so that then gave me the kind of the vision I needed to really kind of hit the ground running with my framework of the triple Venn diagram. So then when I moved into this frame of thinking here, this is a paper representation of me trying to interact with this frame. And so there's a lot of erasing, there's scribbles, there's, all kinds of things about it. And I wrote in pencil because, I knew that this was just a current representation of my thinking. And I started with conceptual understandings because I had had my concepts. And so then I started to list some of the relationships between those concepts, some based on the lines that I had already drawn, some of the other relationships I saw develop as I kind of got going in the process. And so, so ideas like balance depends on the active equivalent forces, and balance drives continuity, and how change can disrupt balance, and and on and on and on. And so I kind of got going with that. And some of my mindset here was I want to get about 4 to 6 probably is a good number to start with. I'm well aware of Lynn Erickson's viewpoint of the 6 to 10 ideas. And so if I had these, plus I had some additional ones for, say my central idea plus my lines of inquiry, then I was going to easily be in that 6 to 10 range that she suggests. And so, I went through and I underlined my concepts and tried to make sure that I was in that concept verb concept form, and that so that to show that relationship there. And then I moved from the note, the learning about circle down to the learning through circle, and thinking about my context. And I was sitting here with thinking about 3 possible contexts, and especially influenced by that word development, that concept of development. And so, sharing the planet was one that came into my mind. How we organize ourselves from an economical piece definitely was one that came in my mind, and then where we are in place and time, especially from that continuity and change lens. I thought that really lended itself there. And so when I was thinking about this development and kind of, ideas that had grown out of my concept map, I thought, colonizing another planet might be a really cool activity to kind of engage in as a problem-based learning scenario. And so, so right now, that's kind of where I was sitting. I'm like, I don't know which one of these themes just yet, but I know something about this colonizing idea. Do we leave or stay because of issues going on Earth right now? And so I kind of left this area there and moved on to the learning to be and area based on all that. So now when I thought about, okay, if we're going to engage with this context, then what are some experts that are going to be valid for my students to kind of understand their ways of doing and thinking and being. And so I started listing all the experts first, so I put historians, I put explorers, economists, anthropologists, I put even some athlete piece because of the development of the self, and you got ecologists there. I've got several things. Then I started doing a little tree map looking thing where one side I wanted to really focus on the skill that was being developed, and then on the other side, what disposition was going to be important to come out of that. And so here I started just to name some of those skills and dispositions, things again with research skills, especially with collecting, organizing data for the economist, and then the economist, his math background, the attention to precision that he would, the skeptic from the scientist, this idea of orientation and risk taking from the explorer. All those things started coming into mind as I started just kind of sketching them out in my process here. So then I wanted to just make sure that I could really see the connections across the different aspects of this model. So then I started trying to use a little color coding with highlighters to see where is that crossover between learning to be and learning about. And so I was able to name some of those with the marker there, and could these skills and dispositions here help develop the conceptual understandings that I listed over in the learning about? And then how about those understandings in the learning about? How applicable were they going to be within the context of the learning through at the bottom there? And then how would those contexts then provide opportunities for students to be those experts and apprentice into those skills and dispositions that we've identified there in the learning to be category. So this was kind of like a check of my thinking, and wanted to see if I kind of on the right track and ready to kind of go from here, into putting this into an actual planning template for the PYP. And so that moves us into our next objective of recognizing the complementary role of multiple planning frameworks. And, it's here is my model going to allow me to make this transition and serve both of these frameworks well? So, I started to panic a bit, right? Like, how do I merge two different ideas? I know some of the beliefs and things get from Reggio and PYP get merged together a lot, but then we also kind of get when it comes to the actual doing of it, it can be a little overwhelming, or a little shock value there. So I know that there is some complexity to this. And then the other thing was, I've been presenting now for a while about this model that I'm in, liking to think through, and I'm like, it's got to be able to blend easily. I think I see it, but when the rubber meets the road and I get into that template, can I make sure that it is merging together there, and then not at detriment to either one of the frameworks and what they really stand for. So then I started laying them side by side, and I started feeling a lot better because the learning about I knew with the concepts and conceptual understanding. The learning through was going to connect in the themes and the experiences in a transdisciplinary way. I knew the learning to be was getting at the dispositions within the learner profile and the approaches to learning. I thought, the Halliday's emphasis on the integration of these three areas is going to really go well with the transdisciplinarity of the PYP. and then the holistic piece of all of the skills and dispositions and concepts and conceptual understandings and context all coming together. Those were key elements of the PYP framework. And so the holistic nature of mine, I started feeling really good, that I was in a really good place to say that these are complementary frameworks, and that I should be confident going into working in that framework. So before we get into looking at the actual unit and some of the samples there from the Toddle unit planner, I want to, in the chat, take a little moment here for you to pause and catch your thinking up. But what are some frameworks that you've brought into the curriculum planning process at your school, and then how complementary to the PYP have they been for you? So Shraddha, will you share a few of those?
Definitely. So please feel free to leave your responses in the chat box. And in the meantime, Chad, as you walked people through your thinking,
Yep.
I think there was a lot of appreciation for for actually sharing things that you were noting down in a book, because we don't get to see that as
Right.
educators. We don't get to go in the heads of other educators. So there was a
Thank you.
lot of appreciation for that. Thank you. Letitia says the Pollyanna racial literacy curriculum for U.S. racial history is something that they use. Ken Brown says the classroom as the third teacher.
Very
Sadia
good.
says Sadia says the CBCI, concept-based curriculum instruction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, then Jency says Kath Murdoch's framework, and Tawhida says the Readers and Writers Workshop,
Yeah.
and Christine says, she's used this type of bubble concept mapping integration for a long time, so she feels very familiar and connected with what you're sharing. The Game Sense Approach in Physical Education by Shane Burr,
Yeah.
something Mihai Katranar uses.
Nice.
Again, the Readers Writers Workshop, Kath Murdoch's Inquiry Cycle. Yeah, quite a few people who are sharing the Teachers College Readers Writers Workshop
Yeah.
as well. So
Absolutely.
quite a few of those things. The Singapore
Okay.
curriculum, visible thinking routines. Yeah, so a long list.
Okay. Yeah. And so we're all doing this,
Mm-hmm.
so then when I thought about, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to go forward, and this should be a good match, and so here's my unit, and hopefully you've had a chance maybe to look at it this week as it went live on Community and such. But Toddle gave me the tool. There was no question there. I felt really good about that. No fogginess, as you noticed. But over here on the product that I was going to create, I was still, a little worried because it was still a work in progress and such. But hopefully you'll find my product beneficial and useful. And then my central idea became balance between continuity and change drives development. And as you may have noticed, that is different than the central idea that was kind of at the heart of my triple Venn diagram with my framework. So that was a work of change over time, and I'll be sharing a little bit about that here in just a second. All right, so let's look at how my thinking started to evolve within this curriculum process. And I can tell you that one of those reasoning behind it is really understanding and reflecting on the beliefs and values that I brought, and what my selected truths for that process were instrumental, in uncovering as part of this work. So some of the big ideas, as we look at this, from a continuity change, I knew that I always have started curriculum planning like on chart paper. I've always, been a fan of that, getting your mind around your ideas before you get into a template, or else it just feels like you're filling boxes. So if you don't really have your mind around the ideas, you can mistakenly bring that truth in that we're going to just get this done. We're going to fill in these boxes. And then I knew that, I'm not a linear type of person. I like to jump around. I got some of my own beliefs and values for how things come in what order and such. So I knew I was going to go in a non-linear sequence of this. And I knew the importance of collaborating to unit planning. And the interesting thing about that was that I was trying to do this by myself, and so that was going to be, setting up for a potential issue. And as you can see over on the change, I didn't realize the importance of the success criteria and how important that was going to be throughout the planning process, and how that was just going to keep coming up in my mind and being in my awareness as I was planning so many different parts. And so that was something that ended up being very different for me. And then this knowing how many is too many. I thought I knew. There's so many things I would say, oh, you don't want, no more than 2 to 3 of those and everything, because you want to encourage depth over breadth and things like that. And some of my thinking on that changed, and it's not necessarily about the wanting depth over breadth, but it was the function of naming, more than just 2 to 3 of something, and how valuable that can be in the planning process. And then the Toddle framework allowed me to reflect in writing as I go. They have that little add reflection button there in so many of the spaces within the unit planner. And I just took advantage of every time that was there. I loved kind of thinking through a little more deeply and explaining my thinking there. And I love that idea. I've always reflected, after a unit. I've always reflected during a unit, but I never really reflected during the actual planning of the unit. And so I really, really liked that idea. And I was so appreciative of that being built into the Toddle framework. And then the necessity of collaboration. When I got going on this, when I got to the learning experiences, I almost came to a complete halt. And I realized a lot of things about myself, that I'm that person in collaborative planning that is building on the ideas of others, or throwing out an idea and letting others build on top of it, but not necessarily just seeing it all the way through necessarily. And so I hit some standstills, and I had to call on some of my friends to hey, get on Zoom with me and help me talk through and think through some of this process here. So that was definitely uh, seeing, just how important it was to planning learning experiences for me. So when I started digging in, so here you're going to see this kind of format throughout this next part of this presentation. This things that continued and changed for me on the left, and then the example from the Toddle platform there on the right and such. So I've generally start with my related concepts, and I think it gives me a vision. And as you know, I started with kind of thinking about those in my model for learning about, and so I knew I wanted these concepts to have relevance across the subject areas. I wanted to think about these before I thought about the key concepts. I could then bring in the key concepts to help me connect across the curriculum as a tool for that transdisciplinary piece there, but not necessarily to influence straight from the beginning. That I really needed to have an idea where I was going from the related concept standpoint. And then the primary versus secondary importance of related concepts. Some of them really took on that huge part of this unit, like continuity, change, balance, and force. Those were huge in this entire unit, and virtually across all learning experiences. And then some of the secondary importance of things like needs and behavior fitness, persuasion, things like that were there. Now, as you can see here, I have named so many concepts, okay? And, anybody that's worked with me in a planning process would say, you hypocrite, okay? How could you do this? You've always told us there's no more than 2 to 3. And, and engaging in this myself, I thought, this is so early in the planning process. Why would I limit myself here at this point? I can always, after finishing the planning process, I can always go back and delete some of these. I could, after the end of the unit, see where my kids took it, where, things started to evolve from. And perhaps some of these would give me ideas on where I could take this based on the students' leads. And so, I thought, why have I been limiting? And so I apologize to all those people I've worked with for years and saying, and limiting their thinking here so early in the process, and how forced that must have seemed at times. And then finally, the link to the key concept before making the lines of inquiry. I've always been in the process of making lines of inquiry, but the Toddle platform offered these 2 boxes of the subject areas plus the key concept box. And so I was able to kind of start this linking of these concepts and such before I got to the point of making lines of inquiry. And so that was something new to me. In this process, and the Toddle platform really helped with that piece. So then when I started looking at a central idea, I knew, I was going to bring in my beliefs of and things that kind of continue to, that this is one statement, it's a concept, verb, concept, framing to it, so that I can make sure I'm showing that relationship between the concepts. As Chris Overhoff shared in his Toddle Ties presentation, the taught checking of yours of a conceptual understanding that is a timeless, abstract, universal, and transferable. And so I knew I wanted to bring that into this, looking at my central idea. And so you can see I started with the idea of development requires a careful balance between continuity and change, and then ended up going with balance between continuity and change drives development. And so as I was thinking and reflecting on this throughout the unit, and not just saying, let's just go with this central idea, as I've told many people before, and then reflect after the end of the unit, I was actually continuing to reflect on it throughout the planning process. And so then that allowed me to make this change. And I can't remember exactly where I started making that change. And I would tell you at different points, I waffled. I copied and pasted the one into the other box probably 2 or 3 times. And but ultimately, collaborating with my friend Natalie in Texas, she helped me think that the other example really didn't feel like it encouraged inquiry. It wasn't, ambiguous enough because of that word requires and such. And so, but the top one maybe did promote some inquiry through it. So then when I moved into the key concepts, again, I knew I was going to choose no more than 3 because that is a requirement that is mentioned in the IB documents. I know that my beliefs are that these connect purposefully to the related concepts. But the Toddle platform gave me a chance here to record some knowledge and understanding about that concept that I was really getting at. So I took the time to just kind of, okay, what is it about change that I want the kids to know and understand? And I just started typing out, sentences and trying to make sense of kind of where my vision was for this. And so depending on how many ideas I had, that's how many sentences I wrote. And I knew then that perhaps these might then help me when I started thinking about the lines of inquiry coming up in just a minute or so. And so now I want to move into the conceptual understandings, and you know that I created these, okay, or constructed them when I was building my model of the learning about phase. And so I wanted to, and as I mentioned there in sharing that, there is a concept, verb, concept piece to them to show that relationship between these concepts. And so I started to list these out, and I added some, as time went on and such. But these generally came from my pre-thinking before getting to the unit planner. And so the old IB planners never allowed you to really feel like there was a place for recording multiple conceptual understandings. I would sometimes encourage people to do it in box 4, where they were looking at learning experiences and such. But beyond the lines of inquiry and the central idea that there really wasn't a home place for those. And so here in this success criteria box with the learning goals, I thought that this would be a nice place for these to show that connection to the learning goals. And then here in this same box is the success criteria. And when I think about the success criteria, I know that I wanted to write these in the form of I can statements. That's been something that I've felt comfortable with in working through iterations of the new planners and such. I knew this was going to be heavily related to my learning to be section, and that these were going to have a direct influence on constructing conceptual understandings, that if students were able to do these and practice these throughout the units, these success criteria will fully integrated into task after task, then students would be able to use those skills and dispositions that are embedded in them to work towards the construction of that understanding through the acquisition of knowledge. And so I feel like there's a huge importance here, and that's why I like putting both of these in this same box. Generally, this is usually something I think about when regards to a summative assessment task that comes at the end of a unit. But now I try to link these more to some of the significant learning experiences, and specifically, there are 2 learning experiences in my unit. One on goal setting. Thank you, Mihai, for having that on Toddle Community to help get me started there. And then the other was the problem-based learning scenario around that context of stay or leave, of settling a new planet and such. And so the first 3 really are about the goal setting piece, and the bottom 3 are really about looking at the that problem-based learning scenario. So, and then the other key piece to this area is, and this whole box was, I wanted to keep it transdisciplinary. I wanted it to have this connection across any type, multiple learning experiences. And so I figured any disciplinary understandings or any disciplinary success criteria could go directly into the learning experience itself and not necessarily live here, so that this truly influenced the transdisciplinary nature of the entire unit. Now, in my factual questions, I knew, as someone who works in the MYP as well, I love their model of the factual, conceptual, and debatable questions. And so I wanted to bring that in to this piece. I knew that these would align with learning experiences, and I wanted to continue to design learning experiences that help to address these questions. But one of the nice things that when I kind of got in the midst of the unit flow aspect of the Toddle framework and templates there, I was able to see the need to revisit the debatable questions. And so that was a really nice piece, that the framework really kind of opened my eyes up to the possibility of that revisiting these questions. And so as you, I'm going to highlight those in a couple of activities coming up here. So I'll share some of that, how that revisiting looked. So then when I started, as I said, weaving these questions throughout my learning experiences, I just wanted to kind of do a little check of my own. And I thought it would be very powerful for this presentation. So you can see here with some gold arrows and some blue arrows here, which ones got at the factual and conceptual questions and which ones got at the debatable questions. And you can see how across the 6 weeks of this unit, how I revisit those things. And I will say, as we prepare here, just a second to go into the learning experiences, I did purposely leave some of the last few weeks of the learning experiences open, with less activities and such, because of one, wanting to build off where the kids go. And so there's a few more activities heavy in the early stages, but then the later ones are some of the ongoing activities, and then kind of left room for the direction from the kids to come into play there and such. So let's start looking at some of those learning experiences. And so when I designed these, I wanted a balance of disciplinary and transdisciplinary experiences. I knew that was a belief I was bringing. I also wanted to make sure that there was connections here between the concepts, the questions, the criteria, that I purposefully integrated all those things in there. Those are some fundamental things to me. But then again, how important collaboration was to this process. This is where I have to give a big shout out to my friends Anat and Natalie. Anat from here in my district, and Natalie from Texas, and two of my favorite minds to bounce ideas around, and such, and that I knew that would be together or be available hopefully on a weekend, and willing to give me a little time to pick their brain, and such. And so they really helped with this process. But as you can see on the right, my big problem-based learning scenario, the leave or stay. So what's going on in this learning experiences is, again, it's 2020 at its finest, right? And all the things that we're dealing with. There's racial injustice. There's global pandemic. There is climate change. Is in its it's just continuing to get out of control for us. And so literally I built in opportunities for the students to explore one of those three pathways, and to try to create a more utopian society. And they didn't have to necessarily in the end leave the planet, but they might have just left their community, or found a safer place, and that might have been on another planet, and such, for that. Or was there enough hope that we could save our current society, our current planet, and so we would end up either leaving or staying here. But all the while they're planning through this, they're thinking about what aspects of this utopian society that they would then develop would be based on things that they would continue from the current societies, and what would they then seek to change. I wanted them to connect it to the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. So each one explores each of those issues through the relevant Sustainable Development Goals to that. So hopefully you get to dig into that scenario and see it and enjoy, and maybe use that in a unit, or and again, it's it's there for you to take and make your own and such. But I thought 2020 has given definitely the context for such an exploration. And then the other thing that I'm a big on is preaching the importance of provocations. And so I created a couple provocations within this unit. And one of the key pieces to these provocations are they come up early in the unit around week 2, I believe, so that I kind of see where they're going. Plus, I thought they would set up some of the thinking beyond the subject area of science and such for some of these things. And so this first one is just, I call it the story of my tries, for lack of a better name, but where they just tried to set a goal, and then they, kind of worked on that goal, and they're just reflecting on how it went, and just being able to have that chance to story. And to me, that's the huge purpose of a provocation, is to tell my story, connect to me personally, my experiences, my knowledge that I'm bringing to this. And, and so build off of that. And so giving kids a chance to just share their story. And then the second part of that provocation is looking at the strategy and such within gameplay. And they've been playing games for years, and we could easily engage them in some games within the regular classroom through personal, social, and physical education, in other areas and such. And the idea here was I wanted them to be able to, again, story about the strategies that they were using within the game, and so, and when you think of goal setting and going for your goal, when you're making your plan, that is really your strategy of attack. Okay, so getting them to see where they've already been making choices and using strategies in their regular life, right? All in the purpose of play. Now this is important information that they've been learning over time through these informal experiences to learn all about the planning, the adjusting the plan, self-adjustments and the self-monitoring, all those aspects of goal setting that are equally important are key here for them to just, again, story about as part of this provocation. And then when I started thinking about the debatable questions and, revisiting those, so this debatable question comes up, is change necessary? And yes, it's a yes/no question, but it's always followed by a, so what makes you say that, And so then you get them, some kids are going to say yes and some kids are going to say no. And we're going to revisit this. This question comes up in week 1 and then reappears in week 4 of this unit. And I like the protocol philosophical chairs. I learned of it from the AVID program that we use, and so it's a great little debate strategy, and you can see how the reasoning that people are sharing is actually changing people's thinking, and you're moving from one side of the room to the other as part of this chair, as your philosophy in regards to this idea, your stance, is changing, ever changing based on new evidence that's being provided. And then the last, debatable question was, to what extent can we control life here? And this one, I looked at the micro lab protocol and whether, and getting kids to share their thinking in regards to some of the questions. So the nice thing, is there's like 3 levels of questions. So you can literally use your factual, conceptual, and debatable questions here as part of this protocol. So you can start them thinking of the factual, move into the conceptual piece of the relationship between those questions, and then into the debatable question. And again, this one's going to come up in week 2 and week 5 within this unit. And so